at the lunch cart today, she was like, "We have liver today," and I'm like, "Don't want it."
Some people really like liver and onions. I don't like
I'm
onions,
so I'm
so
so not into it. It just mm.
I'm an adventurous eater, but that one that I just apparently haven't had it right. It's a textural problem for me. Like the flavor
Mm.
doesn't bother me, but it's just the texture. It's like eating a sponge.
It's both.
It is.
I see. Like I wouldn't even call it. Like I don't consider it adventurous eating. It's just like a food that I don't like. I don't. It's just like not for me.
I think
Like
that's fine.
I do have a rule that I will try any food once. That's like a
Yeah.
personal rule.
I feel like I have that rule, but I have a feeling if really push comes to shove, there's definitely limits to that.
There's a but, and the but is I probably don't want to know what the food is until after I've eaten it. There's some things where I just see I'm like, okay, don't tell me what it is. Let me taste it just like neutral and then tell me. But like I already like my brain can't like mess with it.
I
That's
think
gonna get me in trouble one day. That is how I will die.
I think I 100% would say nothing too spicy. I just don't like spice.
Oh.
So like you give me like this is a super hot insane ghost pepper. Pass.
I figured that one. I don't want to hurt, but I would like to enjoy it. It's like it needs to have flavor. It needs to stick with me for a while. I don't need to feel like I have to like have intervention or like, I'm sweating and
Chest
I need a
compressions, chest
fan.
compressions, chest compressions.
Yeah.
My dad loves pepper sauce so much. He just started making his own, and he makes it as hot as possible. Um, I'm not like that, but like living in a house with somebody who loves pepper, like you get like, at some point, like accidents happen. So like I've been exposed enough times, or we'll go out to get food and they'll mistake our orders, so they'll just put like they'll think it's all for him, and he'll just get like I just have a ton of pepper sauce. And I used to be the child with like a fork, just like trying to scrape it off like the chicken wing, because I'm like I really want this chicken, but I can't do this, and I'm just eating and crying.
So my dad likes spicy food. Um but he can't cook. So that's going to be the preface to this story. So one time my dad, we went to some specialty store and he bought jerk chicken sauce in a like a glass jar. And it was, one of those things. It was like, 7 fire alarms. And he's like, so he's like, I'm going to make quesadillas for my friends. So first off, he's never made quesadillas before. And he's also a proud person. He refuses to listen to anyone else. So he lays the quesadilla, the one quesadilla flat in the pan, just full on flat. Then layers it with cheese, puts the chicken on, and then proceeds to, after the directions say, 1 healthy scoop of jerk chicken sauce for a large piece of chicken. He proceeds to like, I don't know, 6, 7 scoopfuls of pretty much. And then he puts another tortilla on top. So I'll just let that sit in for a second.
Go big or go home. It's like I don't know what you're.
Well, no, you fold it. Otherwise, you can't flip it.
I mean,
you don't.
At an amateur level, yes, but
Okay, well, my
you
father
get to your
was
dad's place.
So finally he tries to flip it, and obviously he's got to try and do it with flair. So half of the stuff goes all over the place, and what's left is literally just concentrated jerk sauce and a little bit of chicken and a little bit of cheese. So he brings it to his friend's house, and my mom, when she got home, she was beet red and like had tears. She's like, we couldn't even eat it. My dad and his friend who like hot food, like they couldn't even eat it. It was just terrible.
I like how he still took it there. Like,
Oh, of
I made this
course.
thing. It's like,
He was proud.
I like how your mom still ate it.
No, she was in tears from laughing so hard.
Oh,
She knew
okay.
better than to try and eat it.
Okay. Now, okay. Sorry. I was about to say, she really, that's some solidarity, because I would have, not for me. Love you, but I can't.
My mom was busy cooking something not on the stove so that she could eat while she was there. She knows better.
My dad's a pretty solid cook, but my mom's also a really good cook. So like he only cooks when he doesn't have a choice. But then every time he does cook, so like he'll cook like maybe 10 days out of the year, but when he does, he will like slyly try and like get you to compliment him. So you'll be eating and he'll be like, not bad, right? I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, but I think it's all right. I'm like, are you really, old man? Okay, the food is good. Are you happy now? You didn't have to say that, but I mean, sure. And he walks away. And that's the man I lived in the same house with for 25 years. Darnell.
The first time my dad met my wife, so I knew my wife. I was friends with her in college, in high school. So she had come over to eat, and the order of the events don't actually matter because this is something my father would do on a normal basis. But I think we just had pasta with sauce. It was very simple and plain. But my dad was just sticking his hand in the sauce pot and stick your finger in there and have a little bit extra because he finished his food. So I think my mom shot him a glare, and he goes, "What?" And she goes, "Why don't you just stick your whole hand in there?" He goes, "Okay," and he takes his whole hand and just sticks it smack in the sauce pot, pulls it out, and starts licking his fingers off. And my wife is like,
I mean, that's the test,
So
she didn't
everybody
go after
learns
that,
something.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't plan on starting this off with like dad stories, but let's do it. My favorite dad story, and by favorite I mean most mortifying. Mom typically dropped me to school. Again, like he would pick me up, but he didn't usually drop me to school. One time he dropped me to school. Now the way school works is everybody knows how school works. First of all, every person on earth knows how school works. You drive up to the gate, you put the kid down, the kid walks inside. That's how school works everywhere. Probably even like in another galaxy. My father decides, I'm not going to drop you off next to the school. He drove into the courtyard. So now every single person is watching. Why is this van stopping in the middle of the courtyard? I was a super shy child. So like I can't express the alarm and panic in my mind. I'm like, all right, whatever. He's like, here you go, son. I'm like, thanks. I get out. He had a Ford Ranger. That was his. He had a Ford Ranger. License plate number had 666 because he's extra. All this is part of his persona. I get out of the car. I'm in the middle of the courtyard. I'm like, okay, Dad, I'll see you later. Bye. He's like, yeah, son, bye. As soon as I close the door, he proceeds to make a donut around my body. Full circle donut, peels out of the school gate. At this point, there are 2,000 eyes staring at me, this small boy in a cloud of dust as my father drives away off into the distance. And the anger that I had.
But what car was he driving? See, because this is a critical detail here.
Ford Ranger.
Okay.
Like one of those old school like trucks, which he was very proud of. So remember, I'm the shyest child in the world. I hate being the center of attention. I'm now in the center of the courtyard. There's dust everywhere. There's a car off in the distance. There's an imprint of a car on my body. And I walk over to the side, and of course, like every single, like, hey, Kirk, was that your dad? Was that your dad? Was that your dad? They're like, yeah, it was my dad. Who the hell else would do that? Yes, that was my father. And I was so upset. I came home, and I was so mad. My mom was like, what's wrong? I'm like, ask him. And he just bursts into laughter. He's like, they like that, didn't they? I'm like, I hate you, man. And that was the dynamic between my father and me. He was the uber extrovert, and I was the absolute opposite. So we got along.
I think your dad and my dad would have gotten along very well.
Until one of them said something stupid, and then they would hate each other.
See, I mean, my dad never took himself that seriously. So I think if your dad said something stupid, he'd probably like rib on him, but he'd laugh. And if he said something stupid, he would just laugh at himself.
My father's a complex man. It'll probably work out. It's fine. His other favorite thing is to tell jokes and then laugh at them before anybody else has a chance to, because he's like, God, this is hilarious.
I do that. I have a hard time getting through a joke because I know it's going to be funny, so I start laughing like before the end of it. So like, I'm horrible at that.
Have I told you guys the best joke that I've ever come up with?
Uh-oh.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Awkward silence.
Awkward silence. Who? So upset. This feels like psychological warfare. This is like really. It's like when Becca says, like, when you see someone typing in chat and then they just stop and then they don't, and you're just like, no, please, no, come back. I need you. Have you ever seen that video of the raccoon that gets the cotton candy and it tries to wash it because they wash the food and it disappears? And it's like the most hilarious, but also the saddest video in the world. That's what that's like. Oh, someone's going to contribute. Oh.
I have not, but I now need to go watch that video.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of, it's rough.
All right, so let's officially get this started. So hello everyone, I'm Nick and welcome to Fireside Chat number 6. It's crazy to think that there was it's not number 1 anymore. So the point and reason of why I tried to do all of this was I wanted to just have like a fun storytelling kind of thing, and I don't know, kind of like a podcast, but with your friends. So you kind of just sit around. So the stories are kind of just always here. And this is clearly not a podcast, but it kind of is just us sitting around and chatting. And you could listen to it if you want.
What stops this from being a podcast? Nothing
stops this from being a podcast. Me never having uploaded a podcast before is what's stopping this from being a podcast. So I think, especially with the pandemic and everything, I think we kind of just needed this. Like, we needed to be able to just get around and just talk to each other. And I also wanted, with Zoom, everyone feels like they get their 30 seconds and then they get cut off because there's somebody else. Like, you're not ever letting someone finish a story. And I wanted to give that chance as well. And I feel like that was something that I could improve upon myself, was just listening, just asking a question of someone and just shutting up and letting them tell their entire story. And I realized that if I took the pressure off of myself that I even needed to necessarily be there in the conversation, and I gave someone complete freedom to just talk and tell their story, that I might actually get better stories and I might learn how to listen better myself. So along came, Sarah and I had a lot of discussions, and we were just talking about the journey of self and, what it means to identify and what it means to identify tech as part of yourself and things like that. And basically it was like, hey, I think there's something here. So I've rambled a whole lot, and that's kind of the intro as to why we've gotten here, and I think that's the whole point. So hopefully that's the end of my rambling for the rest of this hour. Sarah obviously was my guest last week, and now she is my co-host this week, and hopefully will be joining me again in times in the future. And our featured guest on the flames today, and smack dab the middle of the screen, is Kirk Schillingford, who likes maths and puzzles. He's a self-taught developer working professionally for about 5 years, and he is from a tiny island called Dominica. So welcome, Kirk, or TK, as I will call you, because that is the name you used. And I'll start with a simple one. So, how did you come up with TK as your username? If your name is Kirk, I get the shillings, and I get the K. So how did the TK come about?
Ooh, it's a deep, dark secret. It's not. My first name is Tyrone. My middle name is Kirk.
Oh.
But what happened was every single person in my life calls me Kirk. Like, at least all the people like I know in real life. Like, it's always been Kirk. There's never been any question. Like, I didn't find out. It's to the point where I thought Tyrone was the middle name. Like, I would literally go to school as a child. I'm like, Kirk T. Schillingford. Actually, that's not true. Actually, I wrote Kirk T.H. Schillingford. There's a second middle name that we may or may not find out about by the end of this. But yeah, I thought Kirk was my first name until in my country, there's this thing called, well, we used to call it the Common Entrance Exam. They've changed the name to something else. You take it at the end of grade sixth grade, before you move on to high school. And then for that, you have to like get your birth certificate and register and whatever. And that's when I found out that Tyrone was the first name and Kirk was the middle name. And my small child world was shattered. I went to my mom. I'm like, what is going on? She's like, I thought Kirk was your first name. I'm like, what do you mean you thought Kirk was? You're my mom. How can you be wrong? So that's like a whole thing. And that has plagued my life ever since, from like passports to everything, because I don't know. I mean, at this point, like if somebody says like Tyrone in a crowded room, like I won't turn around because like I just don't associate it with me that much. But then yeah, once I started hanging out more online, I needed an online handle, and then I just went with like PK Shillings, or like TK Schillingford, because like T Schillingford was like always taken by some dude or someone. And people just started calling me TK online because they would just read, like, especially like in Twitch, like, because you just see the person's names, like, okay, TK or whatever. And I'm like, I can work with that. That's fine. But yeah, so I mean, it's always a good. I always tell people like, if I'm ever kidnapped and cloned, you can know it's the clone, because the clone's gonna be like, hey guys, it's your best friend Tyrone. It's like, oh, you're not him, not real. Definitely, that's the cyborg, you know. Or I tell like that's just it's my government name. That's what you need for stuff. That's that. That could have been a lot shorter story.
But it doesn't have to be. I preferred the longer version.
Okay, here's an extension.
Oh,
when
great.
I went to when I worked in Florida, I felt like I'd come home because everyone in rural Florida uses their middle name because everyone has the same first name. Like there's like a million like Bob Roberts, so everyone it's just all middle names. So like when I worked there, they're like, "Oh, what's your name and stuff?" And I told them, and they're like, "Do you have a preference?" I was like, "Well, I like my middle name." Like everyone does here, it's fine. And they just put my middle name on everything, the emails, no questions asked, no problem. Like, oh, why was this so hard for everyone else? Go to Florida. I take that back.
So, all right.
Appreciate Florida. Go on.
How did you end up in Florida?
Okay. I ended up there on an internship, I think in my third year of school. So as some of you guys know, I did not study computer science or computer engineering or anything computer related. Well, sort of. I studied Earth System Science and Environmental Engineering. That is my official bachelor's degree. I am a dirty science hippie. And I did, so this was in New York. This was City University of New York. And I got there, I did the first semester, whatever. I did the first summer, I did summer school. I despised it immensely. It was suffering. And I said, okay, can't do this again. So every summer after that, I would try and get an internship. And I got an internship to work at a paper factory in Perry, Florida. For those of you who don't know Perry, Florida, it's about an hour out from Tallahassee, population 8,000. There's a big paper plant, and everyone who works at the paper plant, or you're married to someone who works at the paper plant, or you are the child of someone who works at the paper plant, or, you know, it's one of those towns. And that was a really interesting trip because I was a poor college student. I got the internship at a conference. where I did an icebreaker with the recruiter by telling her she had the same name as my mom because I'd been talking to people for 6 hours and my brain was fried, but that worked.
Was that at least correct?
Yes.
Okay.
My mom's name is Shirley. Her name was Shirley. And I was like, my mom's name is Shirley. She's like, really? I'm like, yes. That's not that amazing. But, you know, I was so tired of doing this. Like, hi, my name is Craig, and it's a real pleasure. I've left it. So I got the thing. They're like, okay, cool. Why don't you come down? So it's like, how do I get to Florida? At the time, right before I had to do the internship, there was a conference hosted by another company I'd worked with. And they were like, hey, we'll fly you out for this conference because you did this work with us and whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. Instead of giving me the ticket back, can you make my ticket go to Tallahassee? And they're like, I mean, if you want, whatever. So after that conference, I took the ticket. I went to Florida. Now, mind you, I didn't have a credit score. So I also didn't have my license. So I couldn't rent a car in any way. So I get to Tallahassee. I'm like, okay, now I get to Perry. That's easy. It's just, that's quite a bit of a car ride. There was one taxi person in the airport at that time because I landed at like midnight. And I'm like, hey, will you drive me, like 50 miles at 1 a.m? And he was like, sure. So I got in the car with this strange man and we are driving through like the backwoods of Florida. There's no villages, no towns, no lights, complete darkness. And he's proceeding to tell me just sort of like a vague history of his life and how he was almost drowned as a child by his uncle and how he devoted ages 16 to 23 to the art of war. And I just kind of like, I made peace with my gods. I was like, Kirk, you've done pretty well. You have a lot of friends. You've really, it's been cool. He did not murder me.
Spoiler alert.
He took me to Perry, Florida. No, that was legitimately the most terrifying. Looking back, I'm like, that was probably a bad idea. Anyway, I got to Perry, Florida. I found a motel. He's like, here's my card. You can call me anytime. I'm like, yes. Never again. I will never see you again. Ever again. I hate you.
But he got you there and didn't slaughter you.
He did get me there. I paid, it's like $112 cab ride, but I am now in Perry, Florida. Step 1 complete. I'm in a motel. Step 2 complete. Next day, I get another like in-town cab thing. They take me to the plant where I'm supposed to work. I'm like, hey, I'm here. Like, hey, you're here. Do you have a place to stay? No. Do you have no, I'm just here. So I'm just now, I have like enough money for like 3 days of motel. But I'm here to work. I showed up. Like, okay, cool. I mean, we'll try and find you a place. They find a place. I go to check it out. The place isn't done yet, but it's like done enough. Now, remind you, I have not started working yet. I have no money, but this is Perry, Florida. The woman who owns the place, her husband used to work at the plant. And she's like, you look like a nice, trustworthy young man. I know, like, you can just stay for the first month and you pay me all the stuff after. I'm like, this is so nice. You guys are they were really nice, like, I gotta say. So that's how I ended up working on a paper plant in Perry, Florida. And I remember my neighbor, who was also the groundskeeper there, Johnny Brown. Who had been arrested in several states. And
was Florida one of them?
Probably. His brother was a prison guard, which was hilarious. Because of course. So I remember the only thing he knew about the Caribbean was like Bob Marley incense. And he was like, dude, I know something from where you're from. And I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen now? And he's like, he got the Bob Marley incense. And I'm like, okay, I can work with that. It's better than when people tell me about Cool Running. So let's do this. But we ended up becoming like really good friends because we were both into like the same rock groups. So we would go to his like I don't know. He like expected me to like be into like Calypso, and I'm like, nah, man, Slipknot is fine. And then that became our thing. He taught me how to play pool, and he also made me drink Bud Light for the first time. Didn't like that part. Bud Light
I'm sorry.
It's not good. He grilled every day too, and sometimes he was a really really lovely guy, but he did grill his meat a lot. That was like his thing, and I'm like, Johnny, you gotta like, there's a lot of carbon. He's like, it's fine.
Doesn't sound like Florida. A person who's concerned about carcinogens.
Okay, so this was like a really interesting thing. One of the things about him was that he had like a truck thing, and he had, of course, the Confederate flag on the back. And so the entire time I was there, anytime like one of my coworkers would give me a ride home or something, because I would like carpool and stuff, they're like, "Hey, is he?" I'm like, "No, he's cool. It's according to him, like he's like 100%. It's just the history, man, you know." And like I don't question it, because like he would also go on rants about quote unquote like the local Hitler huggers who we couldn't stand. So I'm like, it seemed like like, okay, I don't care about the flag, it's fine. But that was like a very 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 interesting experience after being in New York for so long. And it was really nice because it felt a lot like here. Like this island has 70,000 people, so like even in the town, it's rural compared to New York, which has the same physical size but 100 times the population. So I was just claustrophobic all the time. Yeah. And I did the thing. I worked in the plant. I really liked that thing, that job. Oh, but when I said the apartment wasn't unfinished, what I meant was it was converted from a barn, and they hadn't set up the internet yet. So when I was inside, it was a complete dead zone. No cell service, no data, nothing would penetrate. I just lived in this little Faraday cage of an apartment. It was a great apartment.
I think we found the title of your murder, the movie, the murder movie. It's Dead Zone.
Oh my gosh! And if
I
wanted to make a
cell gets
call,
no signal, and you're sleeping with the hogs. It's a dead zone.
I did sleep a lot because there was no internet, so I did sleep a lot. It's also rural Florida, so like you can't walk in the tall grass because like Pokemon will come out. By Pokemon, I mean water moccasins, so you don't. And everybody had a ranch. Oh, but the seafood was good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. They had like oysters. I want to go back just for the food. And the friends, but the food. Okay, that's that. Unless you want to know more about Perry life.
Sarah, you got anything? I don't want to.
I feel like Sarah
dominate all the questions here.
Just trying to process.
Goodness gracious. No, you and I have talked a lot about. I live in West Virginia, and you and I have talked about a lot of like the similarities between your island and like just Appalachia in general, like that rural feel, and I've always found that really interesting.
Yeah, I think
I wouldn't have thought of that connection between like rural America and the Caribbean. So like, that's
I mean,
awesome.
it's you know what it is. I think, and someone's pointed this out in New York. There's so many people that you have to sort of like you have to like retune like your empathy filter, in the sense that you can't acknowledge everyone. Like it's just impossible. So I feel like it would have like once you go out into the world in the city, you just have to treat like most people as background noise until like they break through like a personal bubble. And half the time that's an interaction you don't want. So like you're always New Yorkers on a subway train. It's like when you watch National Discovery and there's just like antelopes grazing. And then when the door opens, like everyone looks like they're the same, but like everyone's radar is up for like shenanigans. And then within a microsecond of somebody coming inside the door, like, okay, this person's going to be a problem. Like you have that sense. And then I'm back in like Perry, and everybody I see, like I can do what I do here. Like here, if I'm walking down the road, every single person I see will get at least like you'll do like the nod of acknowledgement, like the yep, this up,
or while you're driving, it's the
yeah, you got the thing.
Yeah.
When I walk, like there's bus drivers, like I'm not gonna take the bus. This is like we don't know, you don't know the person's name, but like you know them, and you do the thing. So I remember my boss, Chet. He used to be in the Navy. Chet was very loud. And I love Chet because he pronounced my name better than anyone else on earth. Kirk! So crisp. He was telling me he had a neighbor from New York, and he's like, he never acknowledges us when he runs. I'm like, no, he's probably a really sweet guy. But like, that's like people like New Yorkers are like, New Yorkers are very sweet people, but like they're just not. If you're interacting with them, you are, but if you're not, it just doesn't work that way. So he just runs like eyes straight forward, and they just couldn't understand that. But I'm like, that's what they do. But I just things like that, even like the food that people eat and like how people eat, and the clear difference between like a weekday and a weekend, and between like morning and nighttime. Like everybody there woke up early, went to work early. Everybody had like a side thing. Like here, everyone, the life tends to be, you work. We work from like 8 here, not 9. Most people at some point like will grow stuff. People will get land and do things. Like people will build houses and pass them on to their kids. Like it's a very just like a different style of living than like the Northeast, which there's just a lot more of that connection with other people that's not necessarily like an intentional connection. There's this thing I used to love to do. I used to love making friends while traveling. It's like my favorite thing. And like you'd have this relationship with this person that you knew you would never see again. And I've had some like really interesting conversations with people. Like I was on a bus once between Maryland and New York, and there was this girl who was supposed to be going to like some sort of science camp. That's what she'd tell her mom, but she was actually going to visit her boyfriend, and she would do this every summer. And I'm like, that's amazing. Also, I'm a stranger. Why are you telling me this? But like, that's like, one time when I was on the plane, I think to Tallahassee, I met this dude who just did not believe in climate change. That's how the conversation started. And then we chatted for a while. And by the end, he's like, Kurt, I still don't know if I trust this stuff, but you seem like a stand-up guy. Maybe I'll keep an open mind. I'm like, that's all I can ask for, man. And I just, and I never see these people again. But like these sort of nice moments, I think are really, I don't know, there's something very human about them that I like a lot. One time I gave this guy a ride, and he taught me the perfect way to prepare what is our version of the American possum.
Okay. And what is the perfect way to prepare your version of the American?
I can't remember. I'm not eating possum, man. But he totally, that was nice. Like he's like, I can't, in exchange, like, I should tell you, we have it here. We have, it's called, I'm gonna mess this up, and someone from Dominism, like you said this wrong, but there's just two. There's like one's called the agouti, one's called a manikou. One is basically American possum. One is closer to like a big chipmunk. Let's go with that. Like a small capybara. I don't know what you'd call it. But we don't have like the diversity of like mammalian fauna that America has. We don't have gophers. We don't have squirrels. We don't have raccoons. We don't have otters. We don't have beavers. Like you guys have so much.
You're a Caribbean island.
Yeah.
Like if you had those things, I would wonder how they got there.
Well, I mean, rats got there because like they
rats go everywhere.
They came in like the ships, and like they're rats. They're immortal. But yeah, there's no poisonous animals here at all. We just have like one smelly snake, Like if you get too close, it like sprays this smelly thing, but that's it. We just have smelly snake. There's no, you know.
So you've traveled a bit. What was the one animal you missed from home when you were traveling? And are there any animals from the New York area? Obviously, New York City has some unique animals. And
The most
Florida
unique
had
animal
some
I
unique
didn't know was a
animals.
skunk. I met a skunk while walking home, and that conversation was like, "Oh, a kitty." Psst, wait, nope, not a cat. So, animals from here. I mean, I don't think I missed anything because, like, we don't have as much animals, like literally. And I'm trying to think of something we have that you don't. It's probably parrots, but like they're not friends, you know. I don't. Yeah, no, they're all pretty much. Animals was not the thing that I missed because one of the like in the U.S. at least where I stayed, like you guys close your houses because like the way summer and winter work, like insulation is a thing. So, like houses stay closed and people have like indoor AC. Indoor AC in residential homes is like a rarity here. Most people use fans. You might be hearing mine in the background. I should have turned it off. It's like our windows are all like windows. As long as you're inside and awake, windows and doors are in some state of being open. So we want less animals in our lives because there's always like something popping in and out. And you'd be amazed at how many people here are like deathly terrified of lizards when there are lizards around. So almost everyone has like a cat or a dog because they take care of the vermin, and there's like a weird stasis of constantly getting rid of bugs or whatever. But yeah, the humidity. The humidity in Florida reminded me of home, except it was worse somehow. I've never experienced that before in my life. There was a thunderstorm every afternoon.
Yep.
This is insane.
The question of Florida weather is not, is it going to rain today? It's for how long and when.
Sometimes not even rain, just lightning. It was the sky. You could like taste the metal in the sky. This is too much. It's not that bad here. That is something that's interesting to me. It's hot all the time here, but okay. So like when I was in school for environmental engineering, my concentration was energy systems, and I used to work on my first technically tech job was like in that field with this organization that used to do like building audits because New York buildings are very old and they're very poor at keeping anything in, heat or cold. And New York is one of those places that has the fun environment of getting like sub-zero potentially in the winter, but can hit 100 in the summer. So we would like go in, get a bunch of data, figure out like what are the cost effective retrofits. And you would learn like really interesting things. Like let's say you have a large building with high electricity costs and you say, okay, we change all your light bulbs from like the old, terribly inefficient incandescents to fluorescents. Their electricity bill goes down in the summer, but in the winter, their heating bill goes up because the ambient heat from the old lights was having like an actual significant effect. I'm like, that's really interesting. And it also explained like how much of a crapshoot it can be for landlords because there's a little old lady in like the top corner apartment saying that it's desperately cold in her apartment. And that's true. But if you go down 2 floors, the building's perfectly well heated. But by law, you have to make sure that the little lady's okay. So the person on the floor right above the boiler room is dying. And I did die when I stayed. I crashed on a friend's like couch for like 3 months and they were right above the boiler and we just melted every winter. I'm like, this is stupid.
And you have the windows open then.
Windows fully open.
Windows open and a fan in the middle of winter.
It's like the dead of January and everyone's just like, no, it just bears like, ugh. But that was really interesting. Like I got into engineering. Well, I didn't know what engineering was. I just it's just like a thing you heard as a child that like sounded impressive to adults. Like I used to tell adults I wanted to be an architect just so they would like get off my back. I don't know why we ask children what they want to be. They don't know what things are to be.
I think
like
it's called projection. It's like we hope that our kids either have it figured out, and when they don't because they're kids, it makes us feel better that we haven't figured it out.
Yeah, that's not great. Like my dad's a contractor, or was a contractor. So he wanted me to do civil engineering. And I never, like, I didn't hate it, but like it just never felt like my thing. So I decided I would do mechanical engineering because that's vague enough to work. I really didn't know what it was. And I remember we almost had like a talk about it, but I cut it off at the bat. I'm like, we're not doing this. We're not going to be that type of like POC parents. You're not going to get mad at me for not doing engineering because I did engineering. Like, come on, guys. That's silly. So I went to do mechanical engineering. When I got there, like, you have to do 2 more math credits because when you transfer from the Caribbean, they just assume like none of this is real. I'm like, I was a math major. I have an associate's in pure math, which whatever. So when I did it again, I'm like, okay, I have 1 more semester. So I just looked up like all the programs again, and I said, which one of these is the weirdest? And Earth System Science and Environmental Engineering. It had more science courses than the others, and it had more options than the others, so you could like tailor it more. And every single technical, educational, professional thing I've ever done in my life, when there was a choice between doing like the standard thing and something weirder, I have 100% chosen something weirder. That has not always been the best idea, but that's just...
At least it's consistent.
Yes. So like before I came to the States, I did like the Cambridge exams, the A levels. So I got my associates in like math, physics, and history. And people are always like, why history? I'm like, why does anyone ever say why physics? Yeah, also like I liked it. So it's like, okay, well, you should do the things that you like. And be like, well, how is that related? I'm like, well, I'll make it be related. That's how living works. You make the things that you've done before be related to the things you do now. That was a tangent. But yeah. So did environmental engineering, still didn't know what it was. Got 2 years in and I realized all the other engineers hated programming, but I didn't mind it. I was never like, up until that point, no part of my life thought I would be like in this field. I was not particularly techie as a kid. I liked books. In fact, I remember disliking electronics in general.
Okay.
Like, you know, like as a kid, like you have like regular toys and you have like electronic toys, and most kids would want like the electronic one, like the lights and the buzzers, and I never enjoyed those. I always liked like the more simple the thing that like could be, the more I liked it. And there's like still a minimalist streak in me. Like I always like to like distill things down. Like what is the core of this thing? Like what is first principle here? And that's kind of like where I find delight. Also, I feel like sometimes if things get too complex, my brain kind of like panics, like it doesn't enjoy it. Like,
says the man who plays Magic the Gathering.
Well, the thing about but that's a good example, right? Like, for those of you who don't know, Magic the Gathering is a thing that boys can do if they don't want to meet girls.
Hey. I know a lot of girls who did that so that they didn't, well, they'd have to meet boys, and that was the but yeah. This does not need to be a gendered thing here.
It's not. No. Absolutely not. I will say Magic is for everyone. But I guess what I am saying, Magic has like 5 cards. There's like a million ways to play, but I only play it in like one way because I just can't deal with it. Like I only play blue decks. I only play tempo. And we don't need to get into the details, but like that is something that I have to do for pretty much everything. And my girlfriend, who I think is watching this, and I'm trying to look cool and it's not working.
The only way to be cool is to not try.
I don't know why you'd say that. That doesn't help me at all. But yeah,
I'm reminding myself that.
Okay. Yeah, like in general, when I like things, I have to stop and make like a conscious decision of like, is this a thing you're going to get really into in a very specific way? Or is it something that you just absolutely, it's very hard for me to be like in the middle ground. Like either I'm trying to be very, very, very good at something, or I just have to treat it completely casually. And parsing that is difficult because like I feel like Nick, like you have a similar thing. Like you want to get into a ton of things and you want to like dig deep and drill down. And I think Sarah, you're probably like this too. But it's like I I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the patience. And when they don't go absolutely perfectly, I don't need the stress of me going like, well, you failed at this. It's like, well, no shit, Kirk. You're doing like 5 other things. You should not care about this. Like I haven't played Magic in like months just because like it's so all or nothing for me. And I'm just like, well, I guess right now, it's not. So, that's a thing. I really was hoping my brain would go through all this stuff chronologically, and it has not.
But that's not how it works, and that's not a good stories don't happen chronologically.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me about the taxi cab ride after you told me about the town, I think that would have been a little bit awkward. But when all is said and done,
that's not even my best. Oh, I should mention. So that was getting to Florida. Leaving Florida, instead of landing in New York like I was supposed to, I had to land in New Jersey, and the plane almost crashed. So I guess now I have to
what do you mean by almost crashing?
You've nearly died like 5 times in this storyline here. Like I'm concerned.
It's so you guys feel blessed by my presence.
Yes.
Okay, so that one was like a much simpler thing. We're about to land, and the pilot comes on, and he's like, "Hey, we're having a slight issue." I wish I could remember the exact phrase. I'm paraphrasing. We're having a slight issue, sort of like acknowledging the landing gear deployment indicators. Just give us a few moments. And I'm like, I don't need to be an engineer to know that you're saying you don't know if the wheels are coming out, sir. Don't try and trick me. So there's like and the thing about it wasn't what he said, it was the fact that he went silent, and then we felt the plane speed up. Now, the other people in the cabin, so 2 things, like it's all like New Yorkers and New Jerseyite, so they all pretend like they don't care, like, oh, this is gonna make me late. I don't care. I'm like, sir, I was also raised Catholic. I know silent prayer. Don't lie to anyone. So everyone's just like silently praying. And I think the big issue was the flight attendants. Like they were doing, oh, it's fine, whatever. So the plane picks up speed. And again, this is where being from the Caribbean comes in handy. Because why would a plane suddenly pick up speed? So first, we felt like we made a circle, right? So they did a circle while they're trying to figure things out. At one point, like 40 minutes later, he came back on. He's like, we're going to fly low and see if we can get confirmation on the tower on how to diagnose this. I'm like, you're going to ask them if they can see the wheels, can't you? So that happened, picked up again. And then we noticed we were over the river. And then I'm like, that means you're dumping fuel. So this thing doesn't turn into a fireball. I'm just like narrating this whole thing in my head. It's great. So everybody like, so, like at a certain point, he's like, okay, we're going to attempt a landing. I'm like, don't say attempt. Did you not? What was that movie? Didn't you not watch Sully? This was before Sully. So I say almost crashed. We made the landing. It was fine. The wheels were there. They worked. But when we looked through the windows, there was a fleet of fire trucks and ambulances. It was like every fire truck and ambulance in New Jersey just like lined up on the tarmac in case we just messed it all up. So we do the thing, we land, he stops, he comes on the intercom, and he literally does like that big exhale. well, we're here, folks. And then everyone's just like, like the whole, like the pressure like goes back up like as everyone exhales at the same time. And the best part of this is that next to me was this lady who had slept through the entire thing, who wakes up and she's like, did I miss something? I'm like, you missed a lot. So we all get off the plane, and remember, once we taxied down, like you could use your phones again. So before, everyone had like, texted their wife and family, like, I'm sorry for all the things that I've done. Please forgive me. I think this plane is gonna. And now they're like, I'm fine. It's like,
fine.
Right. So we're in the thing. Everyone's hugging and crying, like, oh my god, I can't believe. I know it was so. I'm like, first of all, we didn't know. So whatever. I didn't have anybody. Like, I was just coming back, so I didn't have anyone to like embrace. So I just like called my friend Candace. I'm like, hey, I think my plane almost crashed. She's like, Kirk, what the hell is wrong with you? Go home. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I went home. So, moral of the story.
You got a nice New Jersey welcome.
Hey.
Welcome to my state.
I just love
Come
how
again.
It all. What is it? The Sunshine State?
No.
No.
Jersey's not.
We're the armpit state.
Don't be like that. Everyone's always mean to New Jersey. Don't be mean to New Jersey, okay? New Jersey runs so New York can like sell the marketing of flying. It's something though. I gotta find that out later. Anyway, so yeah, so that's me coming back, and that was that. I didn't tell my mother until like 5 years later.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah. I just mentioned it. She's like, wait, what? I'm like, it's fine. I'm here.
Spoilers.
I mean, I never like why. I'm like, telling them doesn't help me. It just stresses them out. So let's just let this cool off a little, and then it's fine. Yeah. Conferences.
So how'd you get from New Jersey to New York?
Oh no, that part
should I not ask?
Yeah. Not by plane, not by blimp. That's just a too long train ride. I used to live in upstate New York with my brother. My brother lives in New York, like all the time. And I would commute to school in Manhattan, and that would take years. So after an internship in the summer, I saved up all the money from that internship, and I just paid for an apartment for a year. So that's the other thing about like these summer jobs. Like I had to do them to keep paying for my apartment, because I could not go back to living like for like too far, like 2 counties away from school. Because we would drive, and then I still have to take a train, then I still have to take another train, and then I couldn't do like anything because I had to catch a ride back with him. And my brother's a realtor and like a spaz, so that was a mess. He'd be like, oh, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and he'd be there like 5 hours later because somebody's boiler broke, and that was rough. So then I lived in the Bronx for a while, which was like really cool. The Bronx is unimaginably more peaceful than Manhattan or Brooklyn. So much so. So that was not too bad. New York was like, the pace of New York, like I think genuinely reduced the state of my mental health. But I love a lot of the people I met there. I have some best friends for life there. I have some good stories from there. I have people that I would just like instantly give a kidney for from there, So it's just like one of those things. Do I want to live there again? I don't know, but I miss my friends, I think. But don't be mean to New Jersey either.
Well, he lives there. He's not mean.
No,
He's a resident.
you can live there and be mean.
No. The people who live there are the meanest to it.
It's a weird love-hate relationship.
Yeah. One of my best friends lived there for a while. She's like, Kirk, this place is garbage. I tell you, garbage. I'm like, why are you using that accent? I don't know. It just felt appropriate. What else
I'm
would you
curious.
like to know?
I'm curious, TK. You, like myself, have kind of had a really unique educational past. Like your degree essentially sounds like you created a path where you followed whatever interested you, which is very much what I did in my education. What was the tipping point that you finally kind of thought, yeah, I kind of like this tech industry, or I like coding, or what was that turning point where you finally like saw this thing for the beauty that it is?
I think the first time I even encountered software programming as a concept, like I even knew what it was, high school. There were like two tracks. Like they had like IT, they called them technical and I think practical or something like that. The names didn't really mean anything. One was like Microsoft Office, Access, Excel, Word, that type of stuff. And then one was programming. And of course, nobody knew what the second one was. I'm like, I'm going to do that one. When we got into class, it was like 8 of us. Our teacher didn't actually write any code. He's like, I really don't know what to do, but I can let you use the machines and you can look stuff up and you can try your best. And it was in a language called Turbo Pascal, which, there you go. I got some credit with that. I get a lot of credit with like 45-year-old developers by mentioning Pascal. Like, but you're so young. How do you know that? I'm like, well, you see, the Caribbean Examinations Council is run by vampires.
Yeah, that is impressive. I mean, that was one of my first languages I learned, but only because it was what pretty much all the BBSs were written in. So
yeah, it was. I mean, I think to this day they still use it, or you can still use it for like the Caribbean high school like examinations, and I cannot fathom why. Like, why would it not be Python right now? I haven't had the time yet, but this is a thing that I'm going to investigate because this stuff. But anyway, so it's Turbo Pascal. We didn't know anything. We were just messing around. This was back when if you didn't terminate your loops properly, it would just like keep sucking up RAM. But it was like my first time encountering like education as like a creative space, because we had basically you have this thing called like an SBA, which is just like a project that you do, and everyone had to make their own project, just demonstrating what you could do. Like, so everybody had their own things. So I just had my own thing. I ended up making like a really crude BMI calculator. Like, it was just like some ifs and some stuff, and you put in your thing, and it'd be like, oh, your BMI is this, your BMI is that. Just want to point out before we get on, BMI as a concept is bullshit, people. It's not real. Don't use it as a metric for anything. That's not how human bodies work. But this was okay. So yeah, so I did that, and I mean, I liked it, but at the time, I remember being really into math. Like math and English have always been like my two number ones. So I just remember being like, cool, like this is nice, but like I just want to like go back to math. And I encountered coding like a couple more times. Like it never stuck for some reason until like midway through engineering, when I had to take this course, and I just like, I don't know, like it was the first time. It was a Matlab course. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Matlab is a proprietary domain-specific software language mainly used for computation. It's really good at vectors. It's a giant pain in the ass. But yeah, I was taking that course. There's a bunch of engineers. Like we're all engineers, like trying to do the thing. Like I think I took that course because it's everybody. I think like us, the mechanicals, we call each other by the thing. The electricals, the chemicals. Everyone had to take it, and they hate everybody around me. Just like didn't like it or didn't get it, and I just. It's not that like it came easily to me, and I think that's the thing. Like this is a big thing for me in software. Like coding does not come easily to me, but I like my brain. I like the way I feel learning it, and that's always been a big thing. Like I don't, because I didn't do it as a kid. I don't have any particular special aptitude for it. It is just a thing that my brain does not mind doing for 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day. And there are like I have a graveyard of unfinished like coding courses. Dozens of Python courses, CSS courses, HTML courses, JavaScript courses. Just like I would get to a certain point and I would get stuck because someone made a tutorial, but they didn't include config and they didn't include it for Windows. But I'm not bitter. But yeah, I would do that. And I don't know, that time in the Matlab class it just stuck. And I just like, I like this. But more importantly, no one else around me likes this. And people will pay you to do the things that they don't like to do, don't want to do, or don't have time to do, right? That's how economics works, right? So at that point, I just said, okay, because at that point in like the degree program, everything has a final project. So like we're constantly designing, we're constantly like gathering data. So on every single class after that, I'm just like, okay, I'll handle the coding in this group. And people are like, sure. And I'm like, you fool. It wasn't that nefarious. But I really wanted to, and I kept doing that. And then I got an internship. I started to mess around a lot with like VBA, like for Excel. So doing a lot of work with Excel, making GUIs in it, doing a bunch of stuff on the back. I still really love VBA. I don't care what people say. It's a very explicit language. Everything's kind of written out. I feel like it's very easy to read. It's verbose, but I like that about it. Like you have to say words, and at the end you can read those words and be like, oh, these are words and not just, like nonsense. And that internship, they had a Python developer. He dropped out. When I had gotten the internship, they're like, do you know Python? I'm like, I don't. They're like, you should get on that. And I had a summer where I'm like, well, we don't really have anything else to do at night. Let's just do Python all the time. And I just did nothing but Python for a while. So their lead developer left. There was a problem in this code that they were just about to start using. No one could figure it out. They were trying to like find him. They had this other developer on staff, this C# guy. They asked him to take a look at it. He was like, I don't know if I can look at it. And they were just trying to like work out rates or whatever. And then one day I opened up that .py file. And folks, let me tell you, the error was an exclamation mark that should have been an equal sign. Because that's how software works,
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I changed it, and it worked. And
Or in this
like,
case, that's not how it worked.
How dare you? Yeah. And they're like, well, I guess you're a Python developer now. And I did that for a while, and that was it. I did. The other thing about code, like I think the other reason I got into it was in engineering, like people do, especially when you get to like a master's and PhD level, people do have to write code, and people in PhD labs write garbage code. Like they're not there to code. They want an answer. They will write what it takes to get an answer. There is no thought they don't do readability. They don't do maintainability. They don't do composability. They don't do documentation. So like the postdoc writes some code and then they leave. The PI doesn't know what they did. A new person comes in. What did you do? The postdoc did something, so everyone does it over from scratch, and it's just like it's garbage every time. And I'm like, this could be better. And I never really thought about like leaving the engineering space. I was always like, I want to be a software developer within that space because like I have the degrees, like I understand what they're trying to do. I can read a research paper. I can do the analysis. Like I understand the physics. I had to do all this stupid physics, but then I can also translate that into like good working software. And that I always wanted that to be my role. Like the person who takes some body of knowledge and then like going back to what we talked about, getting it down to like first principles, like what is this thing's representation in like a logical way that can actually do something useful. Oh yeah, and I think that last thing I just said, I should have said that at the start. I feel like I went through the first 3 years of my engineering degree and I had no idea what engineering was. I didn't feel like we were doing anything. Like it's a lot of design and you learn a lot of things, but like what am I actually doing? Like what is my actual talent? I don't like I just didn't feel like I had any skills, so to speak. And like you get a job because of like what you can do, not like what you have learned. Like no one says like, oh, you took this course, like this is how, that's not how you get a job. They ask you like, well, what can you do? And those of us would realize that like people would learn AutoCAD, like that's a thing that you do. I can do models in AutoCAD, I can do models in SolidWorks. And like I said, okay, well, I'm the person who will be able to write like domain specific code and that type of stuff. And it was just like really important for me. Like I want to do something useful. It has to like actually help people. The first professional code I wrote was in that Florida place. This person had this huge report they had to do for the EPA that took them like 3 months to compile because the old person who did that report was like 76 years old and she would just ask everyone around for data. They would send it to her in various file formats. She'd compile it, but they had like tanks with sensors and like all the data's there. Someone just needs a way to like pull it in. And I spent like all summer. I remember I spent the first week of the internship like just doing Excel VBA courses because I didn't actually know how to do it yet at the time. Like I know it's possible to do, and I'm arrogant enough to think I can figure out how to do it, which is every day of software development, right? Like you wake up and like, I don't know if this will work, but I think I can do it. I'm smart, SMRT. And I got it, and it worked. And she, at the end of the internship, she was like, "Okay, what do I do now?" I'm like, "You press that button." She's like, "And then what do I do?" And I'm like, "No, you just press the button." She just pressed the button, and then it just calculated everything, and they just put it on a spreadsheet. And she was like, "That's it." I'm like, "That's it." That code was terrible. I never want to see it again. But like that, I remember like her elation at not having to do all that stuff was so big. I'm like, this feels good. Like this feels like I'm helping people. And I've always told people like what software is for, because a lot of people are scared. They're like, oh, if this will take away from me. Like I know a lot of people who don't want to use tech because they think it will like take their jobs away. And I mean, unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. But I think a lot of times, like I tell people, like my goal, whenever I'm doing any project for anyone, I don't want to make you redundant. I want to make the things that are not for you redundant. Human brains are not for putting rectangles in rectangles. Human brains are for communicating and making decisions, right? Like that's what we like to do and that's what we're good at doing. Let me take care of filling out a form 50 times. That's what computers do because computers are not smart. People are smart. So our brain should be for solving problems and making decisions. And that's kind of like the idea of, so I did a lot of spreadsheet automation. Now I work in finance or for a finance tech company. I don't particularly like finance, but like there are very, very messy problems in there. So at least it's an interesting space. Nothing is ever easy. But again, it's just like that thing of like, whatever I'm doing should make people's lives easier. And I usually tell people, okay, I need you to tell me everything that you do, because most likely out of your 100 tasks, there are 3 tasks that take 80% of your time. And most likely at least one of them, we could probably get the dumb robot to do for you. And you could use that time to do the things that you like, thinking about how to improve your business, thinking about how to work with your employees, like making ideas, moving the company forward, and not like putting rectangles in rectangles. That's my soapbox. That's why I like code. Code lets me be useful. Code lets me be useful in different fields. I don't necessarily have to stay in the same place, which is good for my brain. If I leave finance, I might go into something else. Like that's cool. And it's just always, my favorite part is when I have like a fresh problem and I say, okay, this is what this problem is in the outside world. Like, there is a user, they have a thing that they want, they have a desire. What does that look like in like the world of code? Like, what is that? Like, how do you map domain to this space? And then how do you map that out? And I think that, like, that's probably my favorite space to play around in when it comes to code. Like, some people like UI and some people like servers. I really like doing that sort of like behavior driven development of like what is the actual data type that is good here? Like, what is mapping that domain? Domain mapping is like my favorite thing in the world. And I can do that all day, but I don't get to do that all day because I have to do actual job things and deal with clients, and I don't like it. I've talked so much, and I'm so uncomfortable. Well, I'm not uncomfortable, but I have to keep fighting the voice in my head that says, you should shut up now.
No.
It's all good.
This is the one place you most certainly do not have to fight that. This has been wonderful. I have, this last 20 minutes is there's been quotes that are pullable. There's been some deep insights. It's been wonderful. I've truly enjoyed listening to it. So definitely don't fight that voice.
Same. And I think that the last 20 minutes were made more valuable and more impactful by all of the time that went previous to that, because it put context and perspective on who you are as an individual, and your path and why you've ended up where you are. So it's all perfect together. So there's nothing to worry about at all.
Well, I'll find something to worry about. Don't worry about that.
And pull the soapbox out.
So piggybacking off of all that you've said, so what is the ideal role for you? I mean, you've explained some of the responsibilities and things you like doing, but in the context of a world in which there are specific roles and specific jobs and specific companies, even if you wanted to go that far, is there like an ideal job you're shooting for, or a next job, or is it kind of just you're keeping your options open to see which taxi driver comes by and what town they drop you off in?
Oh man, that was before this I thought I'm probably gonna have to tell that story, and then I was like, I should really have been like more traumatized by that incident. Okay, there's
but
two answers.
Traumatizing happened though.
I listened to that man give me a litany of his very, very horrible life. Okay,
fair enough.
Especially the part where he said, and I devoted myself to death and violence for a decade. And I'm like, are we still in the decade? And then he said, no, but now I have turned and I have found a deeper and more powerful faith. And I said, you're saying all the scary words. Okay, so roles. There's two answers. First, the cop-out answer, which I think is, I feel like I'm at the point where I'm not really thinking about the ideal role.
Okay.
Because there was a time where like I was really happy writing like that Excel VBA code, like just doing that. And then there was a time where I had like 5 or 7 interns, and I was just obsessed with like making sure they had like the best experience possible, and they were all learning to code. I'm like, you're my little precious baby. And I would do like my one-on-ones with them, and I really enjoyed that. But then there's like when I got into like functional programming, and it's stuff like Elm, and that's made me really happy. And it's like solo apps, and like I don't know. Now I'm in a role that has a lot of things that I would have not have chosen to do. I'm still writing code, but it's a much more broad position. Like it's not just like developer, it's like software manager. So, I code like maybe like once every few weeks to months sometimes. A lot of it is dealing with clients. A lot of it is doing like maintenance. I've had to learn a ton more on like the hardware technical side of things, which I always avoided and I didn't know anything about. You know, words like DNS. It's all things that I bristle against, but I'm also like, this is what you have to do real things. Like real things, like code in an editor does not help anyone, and life is not simple, and it doesn't end when you hit compile. And I can't necessarily say that I am enjoying it, but like it is a thing that I am doing. And there's probably something valuable there. So I'm not necessarily going to say, well, there's an ideal thing that I want to do, because I don't know. I just feel like this is the one time where I'm going to try and not limit myself and like narrow things down until like my brain says it's okay. That being said, forget all that. Here's what I actually want to do. I don't like big code. Like, you know, some people want to write like these grand, like I don't want to do something. I love making like these small units of code, like sub 1,000 lines, but it's like a really good sub 1,000 line. It's like there was a chef and he only made like really delicious tiny crepes. I want to be like the tiny crepe chef of code. I really want to like dive more into code as it relates to like linguistics and like get into like the semantics and start like teasing those things out, because I think like those are really powerful. I'm doing the talk next week on Elm. I will briefly kind of touch on that. There's this quote I heard once by this developer named Richard Feldman. He also plays Magic, and he said like it's not about syntax, it's about semantics. And that was like, but he sort of explains it in the sense of like code, it's not like about the curly braces or the semicolons or like, and we've had discussions too about like the code that you like and what I don't, and it really comes down to like, what does this language, how do I feel empowered? Like, what does this make me feel good at doing? And that's how people get attached to languages, and that's how people have favorites. Like, people don't like C# because it uses this word versus people like C# because like C# is how they know how to express themselves. And even if they switch to other language, this was the first language where they could like express themselves properly. And everybody has that moment in software, like you made your first thing work, and it took like hours, but like you made it. And there's like that rush of energy when when a wizard gets his wand for the first time. I was like, this is it. So yeah, just like those small good chunks of code. I love seeing like a small good piece of code. I don't know. We talk about stuff like code smells, but like, what is like code fragrance? Like, what is like code ambrosia? You know, what is, not only does this do the thing it's supposed to do, but like it's well architected, it's maintainable, it's user friendly, it's readable, it's extensible, like, and in whatever language it's in, it's like idiomatic to that language. Like it's like the right thing. And we always say like, oh, well, there's multiple ways to do it. And that's true. There are trade-offs. But sometimes you just get to write like a nice thing, and then you step away and you're like, I am proud of this code. This is good code. I made it. It does its job. I don't know how to make that into like a career, but I suppose like my ideal thing, I guess in that case, would be probably just like doing small projects. I don't need to work for like the Boeings or whatever of the world. Like when I came back here, my goal was like, okay, I want to work with these small companies. They cannot pay Oracle for some like they can't do that. But, and I think that's the thing. I feel like code struggles in that space of small business. Like everybody now has a need for technological solutions, but they can't always pay for like a fleet of developers and 3 weeks of like kanbaning before we get into some sort of like agile, like whatever. I just want like a thing to manage like my workers' times. I just want like a simple inventory. I just want basic payroll, and I don't want to have to pay like QuickBooks like $8,000 a year. And that was the space that I kind of wanted to get into while I was here. Also, after like the hurricanes and stuff, I was really interested in good but efficient web design, and that's still something like I need to explore. Just like what when you are in a situation where you don't have high speed internet, where like every pixel of an image counts because it's adding more like the browser has to handle. How do you make stuff that's still good? And performance in general, I think is something like because it's different when you're in the real world and you're not in a space where everybody has like the latest computer and everybody has like access to all these services. Like people like, this is my machine. This is the machine that our business has. We got it in 2007. It still works. Whatever you're doing has to work on this, you know? I'd always been like using Windows. I remember the first time I encountered other developers, like I'm in this office and everyone has a Mac, which was fine. But they'd be like, "Hey, we want to do some tutorials, want to get into the community and teach people like what should we learn? You should learn how to install things on a Mac. I mean, on a Windows machine. Like that's 90% of the earth uses Windows. You can't like turn your nose up at it. Like just no." Right? Like the reason why people don't get into things is not because they're not smart enough to do code. Anybody's smart enough to do code. Coders are not geniuses. People don't get into things because like configuration is hard because half the time you can't even get the stupid thing to install to use it. I hated Ruby. It wasn't because Ruby was bad. It was because it took me like 3 days to get Ruby working on my machine. Right? Like it's always configuration. It's always tooling. And we love to go for the low hanging fruit of like, here's a Python tutorial, here's a JavaScript tutorial. But like, that's not my problem. My problem is I have a rectangle in front of me and it is not optimized for doing the thing that you're doing. If you really want to teach people how to get into something, you have to show up an hour before the lesson and tell people, bring your machines. I will sit with you and I will help you get all of this installed. And you will probably have to check the docs and look things up because it is not easy. To this day, like I'm always in configuration hell. Software is not the space. Code is the easy part. That's the easiest part of my day when I have to write code, right? Everything else is hard, but that's the stuff we don't really teach people because it's hard to teach and it takes effort and you have to actually sit down and you have to be willing to say like, I don't know, I did this once, I can't remember. This is completely off from what I was originally saying. But that's also something that like I care about a lot. So even in the stuff I try and write, like I always say like I want to like contribute to the space, but anything I contribute kind of like has to start from first principles. You have a rectangle. How do you turn that into a thing that can run whatever I'm talking about, or at least try?
Well, I mean, there's opportunities for that. So as you said, like getting Ruby set up, like you can write a quick shell script or something that runs on Windows that it's like, hey, look, this is not the be all end all fully configured install, but this is the basics you need to get up and running. And in fact, it throws your first hello world in there.
And I mean, it's a lot better now, but I think like people are always trying to figure out like, why is this language so popular? Why is this tool set so popular? Because somebody made it like dirt simple to get into, right? We all pretend afterwards like, oh, I love this because of the way it optimized. Like, no, you don't. You love it because it worked. You tried it and it worked and you kept doing it and you had a week to do something and you did it in a week, so you kept doing it. Like I use VBA because it worked. I use Python because it worked. I didn't use Ruby because it didn't work. The end. Haskell never happened because like I couldn't get Haskell to work. Elm worked. Like we like things that work. And when we talk about empowering people, you have to make it as easy as possible for them to get into the thing, right? I haven't always been great at that, but like that's something that I'm actively working on how to do, right? Like that's what you know.
So you'll appreciate this one. So I one time had to write an app, And the app
Sounds like a Dr. Seuss start. At one time, had to write an app.
I can't rhyme this late at night, otherwise I would happily do so. Um, so I had to write an app, and it had to have animations. And an amazing professional animator used this software called Sencha to create animations that exported as JavaScript and CSS animations. And I had to turn this into an app that would perform on an Amazon Kindle Fire. So to do so, I had to learn Lua to read the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and convert it into Lua code, which would then run in an app container that used Lua as its app, as its thing, but was built upon, I guess at that point, it was just Java. But because I wasn't about to learn how to do app development in Java. I hate Java. So I had to learn Lua to convert JavaScript and CSS animations into Lua so that it could run on top of Java, so it could run on a Kindle Fire.
I'm upset I understood what you just said.
But yeah, you do the basic bare minimum you need to get it done.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? There's no tutorial for that, right? Like that is just hard. It is like, it doesn't matter if you're like a year in or like 10 years, like that is still a non-trivial problem. And at no point in that were you like, I really wish I knew how to do a loop in Lua. That's not, I don't,
No, I Googled that.
So, that's, I think from the outside, the one thing that people don't realize is like how rickety software is. Like it's, people like my phone, like when they see an error, they're like, how can there be an error? I'm like, you should be so grateful that thing even works. You don't even understand. Like your car has about 1 million lines of code in it, and even if one of those things is wrong, it will probably stop working. I also think that's the weirdest part of this job. Again, like I think you come in the morning and you have a plan, you have a goal. Whether or not you hit that goal is dependent on, I could figure this out in 5 minutes, I could figure this out in 5 hours. All you really have is like the confidence that like, okay, I think I can figure this out. And when you do it, people are like, oh, but you knew how to do that the whole time. Like, no, learned it yesterday. Wait, what? Like, I feel like it's a slightly different thing. Most people are paid because like they know how to do something, and I feel like software developers are paid because like they know how to figure out how to do something. Unless you're literally making the same type of thing over and over every time, which is rare, you're just like constantly in this loop of what is the fastest path to the knowledge I need to do the thing that I need to do, and then the cycle is just like going and going and going. Which is nice because that means, you're always learning. It's never boring, which is bad because, you're also panicking constantly. As I am. It's fine. It builds character. Like the jerk sauce in the quesadilla.
Too much character.
I think that's cayenne. I think we mispronounced that.
Yes. Too much cayenne.
It was a nice way to wrap that all the way back around to the very first thing we talked about.
Closure is important. The language and the content.
So on that note, it is 11:30. So I want to give a huge thank you. One day I'll learn English. I want to give a huge thank you to TK.
Language.
It really is. Oh my gosh. I wish I could speak another language. It is embarrassing how
I'm learning Portuguese and I'm just like, this is so consistent. Everything is so consistent compared to English.
One of my favorite authors is Jorge Luis Borges, and I keep being told that I have to read him in his original Spanish, and I'm like, I won't appreciate it, but it's like, I'm sure I don't know. So yes, so thank you so much, TK, for coming on. This has been amazing and wonderful, and I'm so glad you shared. I've learned a lot about you in a wonderful way. I'm really happy you came on, and thank you, Sarah, for helping out and being here as well. So I hope you had a wonderful time, and I'll let Sarah, if you have anything you want to add, you can, and then TK, I'll give you a moment, and then we'll sign off.
I just want to say thank you. It's really interesting to get to know everybody in this industry because we're all so much alike in the fact that, you hit the nail on the head. We're all talented at the fact that we can figure these things out, not that we're just walking dictionaries of, how to do X problem. So it's nice to hear how we all have arrived at the same point, it feels like. But it's also been an absolute pleasure to get to know you and learn so much about your dad at the same time. So thank you.
You did not hear like half of the stories about my dad. But
We'll do another one of these just about your dad.
Oh, no.
You can bring him on.
No. He would not. Nope. Nope.
I can edit in a little truck. He can be, his little window area can be talking out of a truck. That'll be the selling point.
Not gonna happen. It's fine. But yeah, no, it was I hope, the stuff I said makes sense. When you asked me to do this, I'm like, sure, because we've known each other for like a few months now, and
years. It's like years.
A few eons now, and you guys are awesome. So anytime I have a chance to just chat, I think like the nice thing is because of like VC, it's not like a weird interview with a stranger. It's not like I'm sitting in front of like Larry King and he's like, so Kirk, it's just like, oh, okay, just talking with my friends. I'm really happy you're not Larry King.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not sure how to respond to that. You're welcome.
I like being me.
I mean, I do too, but yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so thank you everybody for coming, and again, thank you TK for doing this. This has been fun. And we will see you next week. And I believe Brian, I will call him out here. He has agreed to come on and be our guest next week. So unless if something comes up, then we will all get to talk with Brian next week. All right. So thank you, everyone. Good night. And I will see you all next week.